My son rolled up in a silent electric beast while I was scrubbing grout on a Saturday. He told me, "Mum, we came to clean." I thought he meant the dust. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, I walked into a glass conference room, no longer the useless woman they discarded. They took my house for $1. But today, I was taking back my dignity. My name is Margaret Doyle. Though most people just call me Maggie, I am 58 years old, a widow living on the dusty edge of Phoenix, Arizona, in a single-story ranch house that has seen better decades. It is not much to look at from the street, but inside, I keep it spotless. For 30 years, I have scrubbed every inch of these floors myself. My knees, knowing the hardness of the tile better than they know the comfort of a soft bed. I was down on those knees that Saturday afternoon, fighting a stubborn stain on the kitchen grout, when I heard the low, futuristic hum of an electric motor in the driveway. It was a sound that did not belong in my neighborhood of rusted trucks and fading sedans. I wiped my hands on my apron and looked out the window. It was my son, Lucas, stepping out of a sleek silver car that cost more than I made in 5 years. Beside him was Savannah, his wife, looking like she had just walked off a runway in athleisure wear that was too white and too crisp to ever see a drop of sweat. I opened the door, my heart doing that foolish little jump it always does when I see my boy. Savannah breezed past me, a cloud of expensive vanilla perfume trailing behind her. She held a cardboard cup of latte in one hand and wrapped the other arm around my neck in a hug that barely touched me. "Mum. Oh my God. Look at you working on a Saturday," she said, her smile bright and terrifyingly perfect. "Lucas and I decided we had to come over. Mum, today we are here to clean everything for you." She emphasized the word clean with a strange, heavy intonation, glancing at Lucas like they were sharing a joke I was too simple to understand. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. I looked down at my worn jeans and the old rag in my hand. Suddenly, my clean house felt dirty. My furniture felt cheap. I thought they were worried about my back, that they had come to help me scrub because they loved me. "You didn't have to do that," I stammered, stepping back as they filled my small living room with their imposing energy. "Nonsense," Lucas said. He was already scanning the room, not looking at me. "Sav, you grab the paperwork. Call the junk removal guys for the big stuff later. Mum, you just sit down. Let us handle it." He pulled out one of my dining chairs, the wood creaking slightly. I sat, feeling small in my own kitchen. I watched, touched by the idea that my son, the big city financial advisor, wanted to serve his mother. That warm feeling lasted exactly 10 minutes. It shattered when I saw Savannah open the old metal filing cabinet in my bedroom. She did not sort or organize. She was grabbing handfuls of folders, the deed to the house, my life insurance, the bank statements from your father's pension, and shoving them into a plastic bin she had labeled legal stuff. "Savannah." "What are you doing with those?" I asked, standing up. "Those are my personal papers." She did not stop packing. She just flashed that white smile over her shoulder. "Oh, Mom, you know how this neighborhood is getting. We heard there was a break-in just 2 streets over. We are taking these to the penthouse. We have a 24-hour security system. They will be safe with us." I wanted to say no. I wanted to say that this was my house and my risk. But Lucas was there, nodding in agreement, and I did not want to be the ungrateful mother. So I let them carry my life out to the trunk of that silent car. By late afternoon, the house felt stripped. Lucas came to the kitchen table where I was still sitting, his face suddenly serious. He placed a stack of papers in front of me. Just a small update on the mortgage. "Mom," he said, his voice smooth, the voice he used for clients. "We are moving some assets around to optimize the tax situation. It is complicated, but it will save us thousands." He tapped a line at the bottom of the page. "Sign here." I reached for my reading glasses on the counter. "Let me just read it over." "Lucas, I like to know what I am." "Mom," he interrupted, pulling his phone out as it buzzed. He looked at the screen, feigning stress. "I have to take this. It is the investors." Savannah appeared behind me instantly, her hands resting on my shoulders. Her grip was firm. "Mom, do you trust us?" she whispered, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Everything has been checked by our lawyers. Just sign it. Let us take care of you for the rest of your life. You have worked enough." That was the weak spot. The part of me that was tired. The part of me that missed having a husband to lean on. I looked at Lucas, my beautiful boy who I had scrubbed toilets to put through college. I trusted him. I picked up the pen and signed my name. 2 days later, the knock came. It was not Lucas. It was a stranger with a badge and a thick envelope. He handed it to me and left without a word. I opened it, standing in the doorway, the desert sun blinding me. It was an eviction notice. The house had been transferred. It belonged to a holding company now. I had 30 days to vacate. My hands shook so hard I dropped the paper. I dialed Lucas, but it went to voicemail. I called Savannah. She answered on the second ring. "Savannah. There is a man here. He says I have to leave. He says the house isn't mine." The line was silent for a second. Then Savannah's voice came through, cold and sharp as broken glass. "Mom, we will explain everything later. We just have to protect the assets. We are coming over this afternoon to clean the rest of it up. Literally and figuratively." She hung up. I stood there, the phone dead in my hand, staring at the clean floor I had spent a lifetime polishing, realizing I had just polished it for the last time. My name is Margaret Doyle, but to the world of mops and buckets, I was just Maggie. I sat on the cold tile of my living room floor, the eviction notice trembling in my hand like a dead leaf. The words, "transfer of ownership," swam before my eyes, aggressive and final. My head spun, not forward to the uncertain future, but backward, spiraling down into the deep well of the past. I was 25 years old again. I was standing on the side of a highway leaving a small town in Kansas. I had one arm wrapped around a suitcase held together with silver duct tape, and the other arm holding Lucas. He was just a bundle of blankets then, heavy with sleep and innocence. We were not just moving. We were running. I was running from a man who thought love meant a closed fist. I arrived in Phoenix with $11 in my pocket and a promise whispered into the top of my son's head that he would never see me cry again. The city was hot and hard, made of concrete and dust. I found work fast because I was willing to do what others felt was beneath them. I became a night cleaner for a chain of budget offices. I can still smell it if I close my eyes, the sharp sting of industrial ammonia and the stale scent of floor wax. My hands, young and smooth when I left Kansas, turned red and cracked within a month. I spent my nights on my knees in front of toilets used by men who made more in an hour than I made in a week. But I scrubbed them until the porcelain shined. I told myself, their floors might be dirty, but my soul is clean. My life became a rhythm of coin-operated washing machines. I spent hours in the laundromat, the air thick with humidity and cheap detergent. While other women gossiped or watched the flickering television in the corner, I read. I read rental agreements. I read insurance pamphlets. I forced myself to learn the language of paper, the confusing words like liability and deductible, because I knew that in this country, if you did not understand the paper would eat you alive. I took the hardest shifts. I cleaned vomit in bars at 2 a.m. I hauled trash bags that weighed as much as I did. I did it for the overtime pay. Every extra dollar went into a coffee tin labeled Lucas. I ate discount bologna and bread that was starting to mold so he could have fresh fruit. When he struggled in school, I hired a math tutor I could not afford. I remember the nights at our small kitchen table. Lucas would be frustration and tears over algebra. I would sit next to him with a red pen, staring at numbers that looked like alien symbols to me. I would nod and say, "Explain it to me. Lucas, teach me." I listened to the cadence of his voice, learning how to speak like the mothers I saw dropping their kids off at private schools. I was mimicking a class I did not belong to, just so he might one day fit in. There was a manager once, a woman named Mrs. Gable, with hair like steel wool. She caught me scrubbing the baseboards behind a copier. She laughed and said, "Maggie, for God's sake, nobody sees back there. Just give it a quick wipe and move on. You are wasting time." I looked up at her, my knees aching. I said, "If I leave it dirty, I know it is dirty. How I do the small things is how I do everything." She rolled her eyes and called me slow, but she kept hiring me. The hardest day was when Lucas came home from 3rd grade with a black eye. A boy had told him his mother smelled like toilet water. He screamed at me that he hated my job. I grabbed his shoulders, maybe a little too hard. "Lucas, look at me," I said, my voice shaking. "I clean trash, but I do not live like trash. I do this so one day you will sit in the chairs that people like me clean, and you will not even have to look down." I wanted him to be far away from the poverty my parents knew. They were good people. Dirt farmers who died leaving nothing but a rotting wooden shack and debts. I swore my son would have a foundation. That was this house. I remember the day I signed the mortgage for this place. It was 20 years ago. My hand shook so badly the pen slipped twice. I was terrified of the debt, of the 30-year commitment. But I was proud. I thought that deed was a shield. I thought it was the wall that would keep the world from hurting us when I got too old to scrub. Now, sitting on the floor, I had paid for with 20,000 nights of labor. I looked at the walls. I saw the crack near the window I meant to fix. I saw the nail holes where Lucas's graduation pictures used to hang. This house was not just wood and stucco. It was my body. It was my cracked hands and my aching back turned into shelter. And now, the boy I built it for had used that very same paper language I tried so hard to learn to cut me out of it. The air in the room felt thin, and for the first time in my life, I could not breathe. The silence of the empty house was louder than any screaming. I was alone, and the cleanliness of the room suddenly felt like a tomb. I sat there in the dark, and the memories came flooding back, not as warm comfort, but as evidence. I should have seen the knife coming. The signs were there, painted in red flags I chose to ignore, because a mother's love is often just a fancy word for blindness. It started the day Lucas brought her home. He told me he was engaged to Savannah Price. The name meant nothing to me, but in Phoenix real estate, It meant Silver Crown estates. It meant old money built on new condos. I cooked a pot roast that day, spending $50 on the best cut of beef I could find. When Savannah walked in, she looked like a porcelain doll that had never seen a speck of dust. She did not eat the roast. She said she was plant-based, but she smiled and drank tap water like she was doing me a favor. She wandered around my living room while I cleared the table. I saw her pick up a ceramic shepherdess I had bought at a garage sale for $2. She held it with 2 fingers, like it might transmit a disease. She snapped a photo with her phone. Later, Lucas showed me her social media story, laughing like it was a joke. The caption read, "When your future in-law is still living in 1993. I felt a sting, but I forced a laugh. She is just playful. Mom, Lucas had said. She has a modern sense of humor. I watched my son change after that. The flannel shirts and worn jeans disappeared, replaced by tailored suits that cost more than my car. He stopped driving his old Ford and started showing up in a luxury sedan that he said was a company loaner from the Prices. Our conversations changed too. He stopped asking about my back or the neighbors. Instead, he used words like equity, portfolio, and leverage. He looked at me, but he did not see his mother. He saw a liability he needed to manage. The real blow came at a dinner party at the Price Mansion in Scottsdale. The table was long enough to land a plane on. Theodore Price, Savannah's father, sat at the head. He was a man who took up all the air in the room. He spoke to Lucas not as a son-in-law, but as a junior associate he was testing. To me, he spoke as if I were there to refill the water glasses. So, Maggie. Theodore boomed over his steak. You are still. Cleaning physically, yes. Sir, I said, gripping my napkin. Honest work. He chuckled, a dry sound like dead leaves. Well, if you ever want to step up, I have a new complex opening downtown. I could use someone to manage the cleaning crews. You have the experience. It would be less hands-on. It sounded kind of him, but the look in his eyes said otherwise. He was putting me in my place. He was saying that even if I was the mother of the groom, I would always be the help. Savannah chimed in then, resting her hand on Lucas's arm. Daddy is right. Mom, you should not be working so hard. Lucas and I were talking. Maybe you should sell the house. Move into one of our efficiency apartments. It would be smaller, easier to clean. We could manage the assets for you. I like my house, I said quietly. Lucas looked away. Every time I tried to talk to him about my will or my wishes for the future, he would wave it off. Mom, don't think about death. Let me handle the finances. That is what I do. But I caught him once, staring at the deed to my house lying on the counter. His eyes were not sentimental. They were calculating. He was doing math in his head. The final warning came at the wedding. I tried to give them a check for $5,000, my entire savings from 3 years of overtime. Savannah pushed it back across the table. Oh, Mom. No, she said, her voice dripping with that fake pity. We don't need cash. We need you to have a long-term plan. Keep it. We are going to restructure everything soon anyway. I thought she was being generous. I thought she was a financial genius, like her podcast said. I did not realize that restructuring was just a polite word for theft. My phone buzzed in my hand, snapping me back to the present. I looked down at the screen. A text from Savannah. We will be there this afternoon as discussed. Remember, we are here to clean things up. Mum. The word clean stared up at me. It did not mean soap and water anymore. It meant erasing a stain. And I finally realized that to them, the stain was me. It was 105 degrees in Phoenix that afternoon. The heat pressed against the windows like a physical weight, and my old window air conditioner rattled and coughed, struggling to keep the kitchen below 80. I wiped a bead of sweat from my temple with the back of my hand. On the counter, I had arranged a platter of blueberry muffins and a pot of fresh coffee. I wanted to create a smell that combated the stale heat. I wanted to believe that this was just a family visit, that my son was coming to help his aging mother. Then the driveway filled up. It wasn't just Lucas and Savannah this time. A white van pulled in behind their luxury car, and 3 people in grey uniforms jumped out. They marched into my house carrying industrial plastic bins, a ladder, and a vacuum cleaner that looked large enough to suck up the drywall. The noise was instantaneous. The hum of the vacuum, the clatter of bins hitting my tile floor, the shouting of instructions. My quiet sanctuary was suddenly as loud as a construction site. Savannah breezed into the kitchen, ignoring the muffins. She looked at me with eyes that were too bright, too manic. "Mum, we have a plan." She shouted over the noise of the vacuum cleaner. "The market in this area is skyrocketing. If we restructure the asset just a tiny bit, you will be so much safer financially. We are just going to declutter to maximize the flow." I felt dizzy. She used words like asset and flow while strangers were putting their hands on my things. I felt like I had walked into a board meeting where I was the only one who didn't know the agenda. Then the music started. One of the cleaners, a young man with headphones around his neck, cranked up a portable speaker. He turned to his partner and yelled, "Hey, for the open house on Sunday, do we need the photographer here at 8 or 9 in the morning?" The words hit me harder than a slap. I stepped forward, blocking his path. "Open house?" I asked, my voice rising. "What are you talking about? Who said anything about an open house?" The music stopped. The room went silent. Lucas, who had been hiding in the hallway, slowly walked into the kitchen. He looked at Savannah, then at me, putting on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom, listen." He started, his palms facing out. "We are optimizing the portfolio. We transferred the title to a holding company to refinance at a lower rate. It is just business. You will get a better place, a newer place." "Transferred," I whispered. Savannah stepped in, smooth as a shark. She opened a sleek leather folder she had been clutching. Inside was a contract. She flipped to the last page. There, clear as day, was my signature. The one I had scribbled 2 days ago because they told me to trust them. "See," Savannah said, her voice dropping to a patronizing coo. "We are already in escrow. It is done." The floor felt like it was tilting under my feet. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep from falling. "So, this house is not mine?" I asked. 30 years. "And it is not mine." Savannah sighed. A sound of theatrical patience. "Legally, no. But emotionally, it is always your home. Mom, ownership is just a technicality. It is flexible now." Then came the knife, twisting in the wound. Lucas looked at his expensive watch, unable to meet my gaze. His voice was tight, like a wire about to snap. And, "Mom, there is one more thing. The realtor needs a blank canvas for the staging. We need the house empty. I found a place for you to stay for a few weeks. It is a motel on the west side. It is cheap, but it is very clean." The room spun, the heat The noise, the betrayal, it all boiled over. I grabbed the kitchen towel I had been holding and threw it violently onto the floor. "What are you two cleaning?" I screamed, my voice cracking with a rage I didn't know I possessed. "Are you cleaning the house? Or are you cleaning me out of your lives?" It was the first time I had ever looked at them, not as my children, but as thieves. Savannah didn't flinch. She simply turned to the cleaning crew and pointed at the wall where my family photos hung. "Take those down," she ordered calmly. Then she looked at me with a face devoid of warmth. "Mom, you should pack your personal items. We will store the rest for you. Until everything is settled." I turned and walked out the back door onto the small concrete porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky a bruised purple. The heat was suffocating. I reached into my pocket for a cigarette, but my hands were shaking so violently I couldn't even hold the lighter. Inside, I heard the sound of a hammer pulling a nail from the wall, and I knew it was the sound of my life being dismantled. I shoved 3 pairs of worn trousers and my good black blouse into the suitcase. It was the same battered Samsonite I had dragged out of Kansas 33 years ago, its zipper rusted and stubborn. I hesitated for a moment at the nightstand, my fingers brushing the frame of the only wedding photo I had left. My husband, dead for 15 years, smiled back at me, young and oblivious to the fact that his son would one day evict his wife. I tucked the photo between 2 sweaters to keep the glass from breaking. When I dragged the suitcase to the front door, the wheels squeaked, a high-pitched protest that cut through the noise of the vacuum cleaners. Lucas stood by the doorframe. He was looking at his shoes, expensive leather loafers that probably cost more than my car. He could not look at me. "I will send money for the motel every week," he muttered, his voice low and cowardly. "It is just temporary, Mum. Just until we get the equity sorted out." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him until the boy I raised fell out of the stranger standing before me. But my throat was tight, choked with a grief so heavy it felt like swallowing stones. I said nothing. I just walked out. Behind me, the cleaning crew laughed at some joke, and the roar of the industrial vacuum swallowed my footsteps. It sounded like they were erasing me. I was being kicked out of my own life, and the world did not even pause to hold its breath. The motel was on the west side, a place where the neon sign buzzed with a dying electrical hum. The room smelled of aggressive lemon disinfectant, trying to mask the scent of stale smoke and despair. I sat on the edge of the mattress, the sheets thin and wrinkled. I opened my wallet. I counted $42. I was 58 years old, and I was exactly where I had been at 25 broke, scared and alone. The only difference was that back then, I had hope in my arms. Now, that hope had grown up and pushed me out the door. I turned on the small television to drown out the silence, and there she was, Savannah. It was a local cable ad for her financial coaching series. She was wearing a white blazer, looking capable and rich. "Don't let clutter hold you back." The TV version of my daughter-in-law said, smiling brightly, "Sometimes you have to clean up the mess to build your future." I turned the TV off. The silence rushed back in, heavy and suffocating. Clean up the mess. That was me. I was the mess. I could have cried. I should have cried. But something else was bubbling up in my chest, hot and sharp. I reached into the bottom of my suitcase and pulled out a frantic, crinkled plastic bag. I dumped the contents onto the bedspread. Copies. Years ago, a loan officer with kind eyes had told me, Maggie, always keep a copy of every paper you sign in a separate place. You never know when the wind might blow the originals away. I had not understood the legal reasons, but I understood survival. I had kept a copy of everything. I picked up the copy of the transfer document Savannah had flashed at me earlier. I put on my reading glasses. I stared at the signature line. Margaret A. Doyle. My breath hitched. I traced the ink with my finger. The loops were too round. The slant was too vertical. And the A. I never used my middle initial. Not on checks. Not on tax forms. Not ever. It was a habit from childhood I never broke. Suspicion, cold and snake-like, uncoiled in my stomach. They didn't just trick me. They forged it. I thought of Elena Morales. She was a woman whose office I used to clean 10 years ago. She was a tiger of a lawyer who quit corporate life to teach community law because she hated bullies. I remembered her handing me a Christmas bonus once, looking me in the eye and saying, Maggie, if anyone ever tries to hustle you on a house contract, you call me before you cry. Promise me. I sat there for a long time. The old Maggie, the mother who sacrificed everything, whispered that I should let it go. He is your son, the voice said. If you fight this, you destroy him. That was the culture I was raised in. Parents bleed so children can feast. But then I remembered another voice. I remembered a 6-year-old Lucas holding my hand, his face dirty from playing in the yard, telling me, Mom, don't let them say you are just a cleaner. You are the one who builds the house for me. He was right. I built it. And he was tearing it down. I stood up and walked to the mirror above the cheap dresser. The woman staring back had grey hair and deep lines around her mouth. But the eyes were different. The sadness was drying up, leaving behind something harder, something combustible. I am not doing this to hurt you. Lucas, I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling but gaining strength. I am doing this to stop you. I am not fighting my son. I am fighting the monster that ate him. I picked up the phone. I knew Elena's number by heart. It was time to stop cleaning up their mess and start making one of my own. The community centre was a cinder block building that smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. I sat in the back row of the classroom, clutching my plastic grocery bag of papers against my chest like a shield. At the front of the room, Elena Morales paced back and forth. She was younger than I remembered, maybe in her late 30s now, wearing a blazer over jeans. She was explaining tenant rights to a room full of tired people, dishwashers, maids, construction workers, people who, like me, were one paycheck away from disaster. Remember, Elena said, her voice projecting without a microphone. A contract signed under duress is not a contract. It is a trap. And the law, well, the law hates traps when we shine a light on them. I waited until the room cleared out. When the last student had shuffled out the door, I walked up to her. Eleanor looked up from packing her briefcase, her smile polite but weary. Then recognition dawned. Maggie, she asked, her eyes widening. Maggie Doyle. I haven't seen you since I left the firm. I look like I have been kicked out of my own house. I finished for her. Because I have. We sat at a scratched laminate table in the corner. I told her everything. I told her about the cleaning crew, the rush to sign papers, the trust me, Mom, and the motel room. Elena listened without interrupting, her face hardening like cement setting in a mold. When I slid the copy of the transfer deed across the table, she put on her glasses and leaned in. "Look at the signature," I whispered. "I never use my middle initial." Elena studied it for a long, long time. Then she looked up, and the warmth was gone from her eyes, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. "Maggie, this isn't just a family dispute," she said, tapping the paper. "This is fraud. But it is bigger than that. Do you know anything about Silver Crown Estates right now?" I shook my head. "Just that they are rich. They are drowning," Elena said flatly. "I have heard rumors in the legal circuit. The Price family is over-leveraged on 3 massive condo projects in Scottsdale. The banks are tightening the noose. They need cash, and they need collateral to secure short-term loans. Fast." I stared at her, trying to process the words. "So, my house." "Your house is a life raft," Eleanor explained, her voice dropping low. "They didn't want your house to live in it. They transferred the title so they could use it as collateral on a commercial loan. To the bank, it is just an asset on a spreadsheet. To them, you are just a number that helps balance the books." I felt a cold nausea rise in my throat. I wasn't just a mother they had outgrown. I was a collateral unit. I was a line item in an Excel sheet used to save their empire. The humiliation burned hotter than the anger. "If we can prove this signature is forged," Elena continued, her mind clearly racing 3 steps ahead, "or that you were coerced, the transfer is void. We can get the house back. But Maggie, if we dig deeper, I bet we find you aren't the only one. I have heard whispers of them doing this to distant cousins, elderly aunts. It is a pattern, predatory accumulation of family assets." She looked me dead in the eye. "We can just sue for the house. It is safer. Or we can go after the whole structure. If we expose this practice, we could bring the whole company into the light. But they will fight dirty. They will drag your name through the mud." I sat there, listening to the hum of the vending machine in the hallway. I thought about the 30 years I spent scrubbing floors. I thought of Lucas, my beautiful boy, turned into a pawn who would sell his own mother for a percentage point. I thought about the other families who might be losing their homes right now because the Price family needed to buy more time. For decades, I had been the silent one, the one who cleaned up the mess and walked out the back door so the rich folks didn't have to see me. I have nothing left to lose. "Elena," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "They took my home. They took my son. If I just take the house back, they will do it to someone else next week. I don't want to just survive this. I want to stop them." Elena stared at me for a beat. Then a slow, fierce smile spread across her face. She reached across the table and extended her hand. "Then let's go to war, Maggie." We walked out into the dark parking lot together. The streetlights buzzed overhead, casting long, yellow shadows on the asphalt. I shook her hand right there next to her beat-up sedan. It wasn't the soft, limp handshake of a victim. It was the grip of a woman who had handled heavy machinery her whole life. As I watched her drive away, I looked up at the Phoenix sky. They thought they had thrown me away like trash. They were about to find out that some things, when you try to bury them, are actually seeds. Elena's contact was a man named Victor Hall, a loan officer with tired eyes and a suit that had seen better days. We met him at a diner halfway between my motel and the city centre. He didn't look at the menu. He just slid a thin stack of printouts across the sticky table. "You were right to be suspicious." "Maggie," Victor said. Tapping the top page, I ran the address. The title transfer went through. Sure. But look at this lien. It was recorded yesterday morning. I looked at the numbers, but Elena was the one who gasped. 18% interest, she hissed. Victor, this is a hard money loan. This is what you take out when the banks won't touch you. Victor nodded grimly. Exactly. And it is a short-term bridge loan, 3 months. If they don't pay it back in full by October, the lender forecloses. They didn't just take your house. Maggie. They put it on a roulette table. Price is desperate for cash. I felt a cold sweat prickle my neck. My home. The one I had paid for with 30 years of cracked skin and aching back, was now just a poker chip in a game I didn't understand. If Silver Crown Estates went under, my house would be swallowed by some predatory lender I'd never met. To understand what we were fighting, Elena said we needed to see the battlefield. So, on Sunday, I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I put on a wig I bought at a thrift store, large sunglasses, and walked into my own house during the open house. It was like walking into a stranger's life. My comfortable, mismatched furniture was gone. In its place was soulless, beige staging furniture, a white couch no one could sit on, abstract art that meant nothing. The smell of my home coffee and lemon oil was buried under the artificial scent of vanilla candles burning on the counter. I drifted toward the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. 2 realtors were standing near the fridge, thinking they were alone. I heard this is part of Savannah Price's personal portfolio now. One whispered, checking her phone. She needs the liquidity. You heard about the class action suit. Right. The one with the tenants in the West Valley complex, the other replied. Yeah. Mold, rats, broken HVAC. If that judge rules against Silver Crown, they are looking at a payout in the millions. No wonder they are liquidating assets. I backed away, feeling sick. They weren't just expanding. They were plugging holes in a sinking ship with the bricks of my life. Later that evening, back in the dim light of the motel room, Elena laid out the next piece of the puzzle. Victor had managed to pull some internal email threads that had been part of a previous discovery file, careless digital footprints. I need you to see this. Maggie, Elena said softly. Because you need to know who the enemy is. She handed me a printout of an email chain. The subject line was Asset Reallocation Strategy. It was a conversation between Theodore and Savannah. They were discussing the Maggie plan weeks before they even showed up at my door. They talked about me like I was a senile aunt who needed handling. But then I saw a reply from Lucas. My hand shook as I read his words. Sav. I don't like this. It feels wrong. Mom worked her whole life for that place. Is there no other way? I felt a tiny spark of hope. He had fought for me. But then I read Savannah's reply, a long paragraph about loyalty, about his future as a vice president, about how they were a team. And then Lucas's final response, the one that broke my heart all over again. Okay, I hate the idea of Mom leaving the house, but if this is the only way to protect the company and our future, maybe she will understand. Eventually. He wasn't the architect, but he was the coward who held the door open for the thieves. He is weak. Maggie, Elena said, watching my face. But he isn't the mastermind. That is Savannah and Theodore, and that gives us an angle. We don't just sue for the house. We go to the State Financial Crimes Division. This is fraud. They are using assets obtained via coercion to hide their insolvency from investors. That is a felony. I looked up, terrified. A felony. You mean prison. For Lucas, for Savannah and Theodore? Absolutely. Elena said, leaning forward. For Lucas. If he cooperates, if we can show he was manipulated and he turns witness, he might walk away with a slap on the wrist, but we have to strike hard, and we have to strike now. I looked at the papers scattered on the motel bedspread, the forged signature, the email where my son traded his mother for a job title, the high-interest loan that threatened to erase my existence. He let them do this to me, I whispered. He watched them throw me out. Yes, Elena said. Now, are you going to let them get away with it? I picked up the pen. My hand was steady now. I wasn't just signing a statement. I was signing a declaration of war. I am done being the victim. Elena, I said, the ink dark and permanent on the page. From now on, I am the witness, and I am not going to be silent anymore. I took a job at Desert Spin, a self-service laundromat 3 blocks from my motel. It paid minimum wage, but it kept my hands busy and my mind sharp. While I folded strangers' sheets and breathed in the familiar, comforting scent of detergent, I kept my eyes glued to the flat-screen television mounted on the wall. It was always tuned to the local news. To the customers, I was just an old woman making change for the dryer. In reality, I was a spy in a polyester uniform, watching my enemy from the trenches. On a Tuesday evening, the news anchor announced the event of the season, the Silver Crown Charity Gala. It was described as a night of elegance to support urban development. But I knew what it really was. It was a desperate attempt to dazzle investors and cover the smell of rotting debt. I called Elena immediately. They are throwing a party, I told her. I know, Elena replied, her voice crackling with energy. And that is where we are going to catch them. Elena had been busy. She had secured a meeting with the Arizona State Prosecutor's office. I sat in a cold, windowless room for 4 hours, retelling the story of my betrayal to a team of investigators. I had to dissect every interaction with my son. I had to repeat the way Savannah smiled when she stole my deed. I had to recount every "Mom, trust us," until the words lost their emotional sting and became cold, hard evidence. Mrs. Doyle, the lead investigator said, leaning back in his chair. We need to be honest with you. We have been watching Silver Crown Estates for 6 months. We suspected money laundering and market manipulation. Your story. It is the smoking gun we needed to prove they are cannibalizing personal assets to hide corporate insolvency. I felt a chill run through me. My heartbreak was just a small tile in a massive mosaic of crime. Then came the plan. It was terrifying. They weren't just going to arrest them. They wanted them to incriminate themselves on tape. They were sending in an undercover agent posing as a wealthy, private investor looking to save the company. But there was a catch. The investor would demand to meet the family stakeholders. You have to go to the gala, Maggie. Elena told me, her hands gripping mine. You have to walk in there as the proud mother. You have to pretend you have forgiven them. You have to pretend you are happy to be the future manager of their cleaning crews. You have to make them feel safe enough to brag. We spent the next 2 days rehearsing. Elena drilled me on how to keep my face neutral when Savannah would inevitably insult me. When she asks about the motel, Elena said, What do you say? I say it is cozy. I practiced, forcing a smile that felt like wearing a mask of glass. I say I am just happy to help the family. Good, Elena said. Don't let the anger show. Save it for the courtroom. An hour before I was supposed to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lucas. Mom, I am sorry things have been so rushed. After the gala, we will sit down and find you a better place to live. I promise. I stared at the screen. A month ago, that text would have made me cry. I would have believed him because I wanted to believe him. I would have seen my little boy trying to do the right thing. Now, I just saw a weak man trying to soothe his own guilty conscience. He didn't want to help me. He just wanted to sleep at night. I stood in front of the warped mirror in the motel room. Elena had borrowed a black dress for me. It was simple, elegant, and nothing like the clothes I wore to scrub toilets. I put on a pair of heels that pinched my toes. I picked up a small clutch purse instead of my usual plastic grocery bag. I looked at the woman in the mirror. She looked tired, but she stood tall. My hands, rough from 30 years of labor, were steady. This is not their night. I whispered to my reflection. This is my night. I walked out of the motel room, leaving the smell of disinfectant behind. I was stepping into a world of champagne and lies, but for the first time in weeks, I wasn't walking into a trap. I was the trap. The ballroom of the Royal Palms Hotel was a galaxy of artificial stars. Crystal chandeliers, the size of small cars, hung from the ceiling, dripping light onto a sea of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted prime rib, a scent so rich it made my stomach turn. I walked in, my borrowed black dress feeling like armor, my too tight heels pinching with every step. I felt like an imposter, a woman who smelled of bleach trying to blend into a world of rosewater. But I kept my chin up. I wasn't here to fit in. I was here to burn it down. Oh, there she is. Savannah's voice cut through the ambient jazz like a glass breaking. She swept toward me in a silver sequined gown that shimmered like fish scales. She threw her arm around my shoulder, pulling me tight against her side, facing a group of wealthy donors. This is my amazing mother-in-law. Maggie, she announced, her smile dazzling. The one who taught me what hard work means. Isn't she just grounded? I was a prop, a rustic accessory to prove her humility. The irony was suffocating. The woman who had kicked me into a cheap motel was using me to sell her image of family values. I forced a smile, my face muscles aching. Lovely to meet you, I murmured. Before I could escape, Theodore Price appeared. He didn't look at me. He grabbed Lucas's elbow and steered us toward a quiet corner near the bar. A man was waiting there. He was older, with silver hair and a suit that looked like it cost more than my entire life's earnings. This was the investor, but I knew the truth. He was Detective Miller from the Financial Crimes Division. I saw Eleanor standing by a potted palm across the room, nursing a sparkling water. She gave me the tiniest nod. Showtime. Mr. Sterling? Theodore boomed, shaking the detective's hand. Let me introduce the family. This is my daughter Savannah, her husband Lucas, and his mother, Maggie. We are all deeply invested in the success of Silver Crown. A pleasure, Miller said, his voice smooth. As I was saying, Theodore, I am ready to inject the $5 million, but my auditors are concerned about collateral. The Scottsdale project is risky. Theodore laughed, but I saw the sweat on his upper lip. Nonsense. Our asset portfolio is robust. In fact, we just consolidated several family holdings to strengthen our position. Lucas's mother here. He gestured to me with a wave of his hand. Just transferred a prime residential property to our portfolio. It is fully paid off. Clean title. It is ready to be leveraged immediately for cash flow. Lucas shifted his weight, staring at the floor. He looked like he wanted to vanish. Miller raised an eyebrow. Is that so, and you are willing to extend that collateral? Perhaps use that property to secure a larger bridge loan, say, another 200,000. Absolutely, Theodore said without hesitation. He turned to me, his eyes hard and warning, but his voice dripping with syrup. Maggie, you wouldn't mind if we utilized the house just a little bit more, would you? It is all for Lucas's future. After all, we are all a team. The air between us grew thin. He was doing it right in front of me, selling my security for his gamble, daring me to object in front of the money. I looked at Theodore. I looked at Savannah, whose smile was fixed and predatory. Then I looked at Lucas, who was pale and sweating. I took a slow breath. I always believe my son deserves the best, I said, my voice steady and quiet. And I also believe that justice always finds its way back to the right place. It was a non-answer, a riddle. Savannah's smile faltered. She squinted at me, sensing a shift in the wind, a sudden drop in temperature. That is cryptic. Mom, she said, a nervous laugh escaping her throat. Before she could say more, the doors to the ballroom opened. 3 men in dark suits walked in. They didn't look like guests. They moved with purpose. They headed straight for our corner. Theodore Price, Savannah Price, one of them said, flashing a badge. We need to have a word with you in private regarding some irregularities in your mortgage applications. The jazz band kept playing a cheerful tune, but the bubble around us burst. The chatter nearby stopped. Heads turned. The whispers started like a brush fire. Theodore turned purple. This is outrageous. Do you know who I am? We are in the middle of a meeting, sir. Please come with us, the agent said, his hand hovering near his belt. Now. Savannah looked around wildly, her composure cracking. She looked at the investor, who simply took a sip of his drink and turned away. Lucas grabbed my arm, his grip trembling. Mom, what is happening? What is going on? I looked at him, the boy I raised, the man who let me fall. You always told me to trust you. Lucas, I said, my voice trembling but finding its steel. Tonight? You try trusting me for once. I pulled my arm away from him. As Theodore and Savannah were escorted out the side door, arguing loudly, the gala dissolved into chaos. I walked away from the scene, past the staring guests, past the table of untouched shrimp. I stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was hot, but it felt clean. Below me, the city of Phoenix sprawled out like a grid of gold. My phone buzzed. It was Elena. We have enough for a temporary asset freeze. They are done. The last step is yours. Maggie. I looked out at the lights, breathing in the silence. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard clarity of a job that needed to be finished. The morning after the gala, the sun rose over Phoenix like a judge's gavel. Theodore and Savannah woke up to frozen bank accounts and seized assets. The Silver Crown Empire was paralyzed. Lucas found out through a mass internal email sent by the legal department, warning employees not to shred a single document. He realized then that the ground beneath him had not just cracked, it had dissolved. I walked into the glass-walled conference room at the Silver Crown headquarters an hour later. Elena was right beside me, her briefcase heavy with justice. When I stepped through the door, the air left the room. Savannah jumped up from her leather chair, her eyes wide and bloodshot. Mom, what are you doing here? She demanded, her voice shrill. I did not answer. I took the seat at the head of the table. The state prosecutor wasted no time. He projected images onto the wall, the forged signature on the deed, the emails plotting the transfer, and the high-interest loan documents. He placed the expensive pen Lucas had handed me that day in the center of the table. It looked like a weapon now. We have the paper trail, the prosecutor said calmly, but we also have the intent. He pressed a button on his laptop. A recording filled the room. It was Savannah's voice, clear and cruel, captured during a wiretapped phone call with her father weeks ago. She is old. She is used to cleaning up other people's mess. She won't fight. We will kick her out. She will cry a bit. Then she will adapt. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Lucas turned a sickly shade of grey. He looked at his wife. Really looked at her. For the first time in years. I turned to my son. I did not scream. I did not cry. I spoke with the quiet authority of a woman who had survived everything life threw at her. You came to my house, I said, my voice steady. You told me you were there to clean. You told me to trust you. And then you threw me away like a used rag. The prosecutor leaned forward. Lucas, we are offering you a one-time deal. You were coerced. If you testify against Silver Crown and admit your role, we will recommend leniency. But the condition is absolute. You must acknowledge the transfer was fraudulent and return the deed to Mrs. Doyle immediately. Savannah jabbed her elbow into Lucas's ribs. Don't you dare, she hissed, her face twisted with panic. We are in this together. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a small, faded photograph. It was Lucas, at 6 years old, standing in front of our house on the day we got the keys, holding a plastic shovel. I slid it across the polished mahogany table until it rested in front of him. Lucas looked at the photo. His shoulders began to shake. The veneer of the rich executive cracked, and the little boy I raised peeked through the ruins. Tears spilled onto his expensive suit. I will cooperate, he choked out. He did not look at Savannah. He looked at the prosecutor. That house never belonged to anyone but my mother. I betrayed her. I want to fix it. Savannah stared at him like he was a stranger, her mouth opening and closing in silent fury. The aftermath was swift. The transfer was voided before lunch. My house was mine again. Silver Crown Estates was buried under an avalanche of subpoenas, and bankruptcy was inevitable. Savannah and Theodore were led out in handcuffs to face fraud charges. Lucas lost his job, his wife, and his reputation. But as he walked out of that building carrying a box of personal items, he looked lighter than he had in years. I returned to my house that evening. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. It smelled of fresh paint and emptiness. The staging furniture was gone, hauled away by the creditors. The walls were bare. I walked to the kitchen and smoothed out my old tablecloth, placing my family photos back on the counter one by one. I sat in my creaky chair and listened to the familiar hum of my old refrigerator. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. A shadow fell across the porch. I looked up to see Lucas standing outside the screen door. He looked tired and broken, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the handle. "Mom," he asked softly, his voice trembling. Can I help you clean up?" I looked at the broom standing in the corner. I looked at my son, who had lost everything to find himself. I gave him a small, thin smile. Okay, I said. But this time, we clean for real. We start by cleaning up how you treat me. The door closed behind him, shutting out the heat of the desert. We had a long way to go. But for the first time in a long time, the house felt like a home again. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop your city or country in the comments below. I read every single one to see how far our family reaches. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed to Grandma's Family Diary and smash that hype button to help this story get heard by more people. See you in the next video.